Hi there, and welcome to the second season of podcasts, which accompany Mike Dunlop's new book, The Art of the Turnaround, published on the 9th of September. I'm Alex Dunlop. I'm a BBC News correspondent, and it's my huge pleasure to introduce Mike Dunlop, or if you've seen the first season of podcasts, to reintroduce him. Mike founded and is the chief executive officer of two very successful Seattle-based companies, NetInspect and Autonomous Machining. Now, in the first season, Mike and I dived into his book, which is essentially a manual on how to revive, how to turn around failing companies. In the first series of podcasts, I was toe-to-toe with Mike in the same studio in Seattle, but with our busy schedules, we are doing this remotely. I'm on the other side of the pond, or the Atlantic, here in Norfolk, in the UK. In season one, I was conscious that we only touched on some themes such as mentoring, the pursuit of happiness, stewardship of companies. And I thought, there really is so much more to explore here. And I'm very keen to drill down deeper into key aspects of your wider personal philosophy, Mike, to see how it informs your business acumen, if you like. Let's start with mentorship, because I don't think you can underscore how important mentoring is. In a minute, we'll go back to your school days in England where you were born, of course. And we'll talk about the first mentor that came into your life as a teenager. It'll resonate with so many people listening and watching this. And that's the idea of your teacher as your mentor. I'm just curious to know, when it comes to teachers and mentors, do you think the two are synonymous, Mike?
I think they can be, but it's kind of rare to have a specific mentoree relationship because they're teaching so many children in a class, and it'd be impossible for them to mentor everybody. But these unique people isolate individuals that they offer additional not only teaching, but care and mentoring. And that becomes very, very obvious when you're the recipient of a mentor. And that's what happened to me. Completely out of the blue, one of my teachers spotted that I had special capabilities in mathematics. And
we'll come on to that in a second. I'm just curious to know, how do they decide who to mentor?
I have no idea. All I can look at is who I decide to mentor. And it's recognizing a hidden gem, a spirit in that individual. And also the mentoree kind of buys into the process. And you can see the value of being a mentor. And you can see how the right person genuinely prospers from your mentoring.
Let's rack back 70 or so years to the 1950s in rural England. You were at a school, a boarding school, where you pretty much lived. Was that caring?
It was the antithesis of caring. It was the opposite of caring. This was the most painful part of my life without any comparison. Everything else was a minor disturbance compared to that. It was utterly horrific. My parents were very distant and the opposite of caring. Shuffled off to a boarding school at the age of 8 and just kind of left there.
It's an extraordinary backdrop, isn't it, that you were actually being brought up in an environment that was far from mentoring, far from caring.
Yeah, it was the opposite of it. It was terrifying. I mean, there was no other word to describe it. So this was the backdrop. And I think being naturally rebellious and knowing how it felt to be in this sort of quasi-abusive environment, I was absolutely determined that I was not going to let that affect me. But also I knew how it felt. And that gave me the empathy to see other people who were in a similar situation and offered to help them.
What were the teachers, or I suppose you call them masters in your day, what were they like in the round?
Distant, repetitive, rather boring, and I could see no purpose in what they were teaching me except mathematics. And I did have a very good mathematics teacher, even at my prep school. And that really, his name was Mr. Cundy, and he was actually a very good teacher. He introduced me to all the basic concepts of mathematics, but he took us very far beyond the standard curriculum in mathematics. And I think he was probably one of the early uh, instigators of my interest in mathematics.
That's interesting, actually, because you mentioned optimism as a key quality. I mentioned kindness. I think another one, which is sort of identified by that first teacher's passion.
Yes, I think some teachers are passionate about their subject matter. The challenge is for any teacher is they have to perform every day in front of a group of people that may not be receptive to what they're saying. So being a teacher is one of the hardest jobs because you're up on stage every day. You're trying your best not to make it boring and repetitive, but it is extraordinarily difficult to go on stage every day, create excitement, confidence, all the things that good teachers do. And I just think the job is extremely difficult. And then you have terrible students like me, which makes it even worse. So
What made you such a bad student?
I didn't like what they were teaching me. I loved learning, but I had this real objection to being told what things were. I'll find out for myself. I'll read, I'll learn, I'll choose the subjects that I like, but I don't want to be dictated by someone that this is what I had to learn. I mean, I was a totally intransigent student. If I was a teacher, I would have given up on me and just said, this one is hopeless, which a number of teachers did. They sort of resigned to the fact that I wasn't going to comply. And so it was again a difficult time. But the environment, everything, I think, made me unbelievably combative. I was going to get through this monstrous society and come out the other end smiling.
And then one man stood out from the rest. One teacher stood out from the rest. Tell me who that was.
This was Dr. Martin Cundy, and as I've done more research on him, and you look at some of these mentors, there's way more information behind the scenes. They are very, very unusual people. Dr. Martin Cundy graduated from Cambridge University. He got a doctorate in mathematics. He won the same award as Alan Turing and was probably one of the leading mathematicians of his age. He rewrote the entire mathematics curriculum for all schools in England. He did it with two other people. No one asked him to do it. He just felt that math was such an important subject, it needed to have more depth and a different way of teaching it.
It's interesting, actually, as you say, he graduated from Cambridge. He was in Cambridge in the 1930s. And Alan Turing, of course, the famous Enigma codebreaker in the Second World War, was one of his contemporaries at Cambridge.
Yes, and they actually knew each other. And there were odd juxtaposition there because Alan Turing also went to the same school I went to, Sherborne, that Dr. Cundy came to teach at. And so there were all these sort of odd connections. Alan Turing also worked with my mother at Bletchley during the war. So we have these multiple connections that almost seem utterly serendipitous.
Just to interrupt, Mike, for those who are probably looking up Martin Cundy now, and he's well worth Googling, it's Martin with a Y, Martyn, isn't it?
Yes, that was the early days when we had people misspelling their names and adding odd characters in, but he was a leader in that.
Yeah, I don't think we can underestimate this guy because I read an obituary of him in the Times, a very flattering obituary, and I'll just quote a bit here. He was recognized, says the Times, as the greatest teacher of his generation. He was a loss to university mathematics, but a greater gain to schools. He could have reached such heights, couldn't he? Which poses another question. And yet he chose to teach schoolboys. He could have taught people who had done postgrads, but he went for schoolboys. Why do you think that is?
Well, he actually discussed that a lot, and he felt that there was a transition at the age of 14, 15, where you could take someone to create a mathematician out of them. Whereas by the time they got to university, particularly at the level that he was talking about, they were formed. His improvement with them would be at the margins. And he felt that he could make this fundamental change with students 14, 15 years old. And that was his passion. He wanted to make the biggest impact that he possibly could, and he felt that was with students who were just starting to gain a foothold in mathematics, and he could take them to a different stratosphere.
I just wonder why, in that case, so many great academics want to teach at university level.
It's safer. You don't have as many failures. The fact that they're there, you're talking about someone who's brilliant, and the range is very limited. When you're talking about a normal classroom of school, you have to differentiate and find all those hidden gems. And I think it's kind of more exciting for the right sort of person. And Dr. Cundy was certainly that person.
Yeah, and probably more volatile.
Well, he was a gentle soul. I mean, he was a—
No, I'm talking about the students.
Oh, yes.
How did he actually become your mentor? When does that label sort of attach? Is it a gradual thing, or did you lock into him straight away?
No, he locked in on me. And that was very strange. No one had expressed even the slightest interest in me. But I kind of stood out because I did no coursework and kind of looked out the window and read my books way ahead of what I was being taught. And but when it came to the exams, I got everything right. So they had to take this intransigent student and put them at the top and give them a gold star and an award. And he spotted something a little strange in that. No coursework, apparently not learning, but still coming out on top. And he came into one of my classes and he asked me to do a fairly complex quadratic equation. And being a kind of know-it-all at the age of 14, 15, I said, which way would you like me to do it? And he said, there is only one way. And I said, no, there are two ways. And he said, no, there's only one way. And I said, no, sir, two ways. And he said,
How old are you at this point?
15.
How old are you?
14, 15. Yeah. And right. So he said to me, okay, you and I both know the one way. Show me the other way. So I said, well, you can calculate in your head, you can go to the answer, and then you can work backwards to the equation. I said, that's a lot more fun. And he looked at me and said, come with me. And he said, I've spoke to the headmaster, and you have permission to sit in the back of my class. You don't have to do anything. You can just do whatever you feel like doing. So the story progressed a little bit because I decided this was an extraordinary, wonderful man who had paid attention to me, that had put me in a unique position almost in the entire school, because now I was sitting in the back row of 17, 18-year-old students. And I said to Dr. Cundy, what would you do if you were in my position? And he immediately said, I'm going to teach you the basics of mathematics, of devices that are just now starting to appear that will change the world. And I thought, wow, this is stunning. And he said, they're called computers. And there is a special algebra that you have to learn. It's quite difficult, but I will teach you the full concept of Boolean algebra. And you can use it or not use it, learn it, and you can go as far as you want in it. But he said that will be the basis of of life as we know it in the future. So not only was he a brilliant man, but he was unbelievably prescient.
Were you on your own, or were there other boys in a similar position?
No, just me, isolated at the back of the room with Dr. Cundy taking special care and helping me when I needed help, but kind of letting me be freelance, which was extraordinary.
What was your relationship with him? Was it a warm relationship or quite a sort of
In awe, in awe.
Mhm.
This was a man who exceeded my intellect by so many degrees that I wanted to sort of at least get on the ladder and sort of climb a few steps with him, because I immediately assessed this was an extraordinary man.
Um, what did the other boys make of it?
They thought I was a little odd because of what I liked to study. I was kind of ignored. At that age, I stammered very badly. And so I was sort of ostracized because I couldn't communicate very well. And so it was a fairly lonely existence. They thought I was sort of almost being punished by being set off in a different class of boys, totally different age. And but the dots started to connect, particularly when he came to me and said, you want to know how this algebra is going to be used. And he said, what happens at the beginning of the school term? And I said, absolute chaos. We have 42 classrooms. We have 600 boys. We have 52 teachers. We have chemistry labs that you can only teach chemistry in. He said the algorithm of working out our timetable for the year, we have 5 grades. We have curriculum that has to be satisfied in each of those grades. And he said, I will show you how you can design a system to solve the problem. And so we started writing down the rules. There can only be one teacher in a classroom. In the art room, you can't teach religion. In the chemistry class, you can't teach languages. So we started building this very complex algorithm of the rules based to make sure all the people went to the right classroom with the right teacher and were taught the right subject. So he wrote down all these rules, and he showed me how to look at rules, and he said, I'll send it up to a friend of mine at Imperial College in London, which was the most advanced computer studying college probably in the world at that stage. And they came back with the answer. And the next year, there was not a single problem with the timetable. And he said, this is the power that I'm teaching you. This is what you need to understand, that these are not just calculators. These are things that can fundamentally change how everything works. And he was unbelievably passionate about it.
It's interesting, the timing of this, Mike, because had he encountered you, I don't know, 10 years earlier, it's an alignment of the stars, isn't it, in a way?
It is, as I said before, it's serendipitous. I mean,
Uh-huh.
I was receptive. I had capability. He was there. He decided to adopt me. And
I think my point is that had he met you 10 years earlier, that burgeoning idea of computers wouldn't have been in the frame.
there's so many aspects like that. And particularly when I left school, the first or second job that I went to after I was fired from the first was into the computer business. And then 25 years ago, I founded my own computer company. And so you've no idea what sort of triggers these mentorship relationships can impact.
Was Dr. Cundy curious as to what you would do with all this newfound knowledge? Did he ask you where you'd take it?
No, it was pure interest, and he wanted to stretch my imagination. He wanted to build a foundation. He had this extraordinary comfort that I would do just fine, and he didn't have to worry about me. And I didn't need direction. I needed basis. I needed interest. But he seemed to be almost detached in a way that you'll do just fine, no problem. And you'll find something that works for you, and kind of don't worry about it.
It does rather make me think that it's a bit of lottery. What if Dr. Cundy had gone to another school, or if there was another Mike who's good at maths, whose life chances would never be realized because he or she was at a school, I don't know, 50 miles away.
Well, that's the important aspect of mentorship and they tend to appear almost miraculously at the time you need them most. And I've looked back at my life and I've looked at the mentors, and mentors seem to have extraordinary timing. Just when the ground is laid, they appear.
I don't want to be contrary, but as a journalist, I think that's my right. Dr. Cundy went on to be a missionary in Malawi for many years, a very devout Christian. He then went on and retired in the north of England. It just makes me think, if he's such a great teacher and a great mentor, why didn't he go for a school where pupils were disadvantaged, where he really could bring out the best in those who needed it most, rather than a fee-paying public school?
Yeah, I think he felt that that was the best pasture to plow. I mean, people have different desires in what they want to do. By the fact he redesigned mathematics for the whole of England, I think he had aspirations to affect as many people as possible. I was lucky just to be the recipient that just happened to be right next door, and of this very generous man. But people end up in different places. He ended up at my school. I was lucky enough to take advantage of it. It's very hard to rationalize why people do things, but he gave some great gifts to a great number of people.
There may be some out there who look at his biography and think, what a shame he didn't go on to reach huge heights of mathematical achievement, get a Nobel Prize, but instead he settled for this quiet life. Is there a bit of you that thinks he could have gone so much further and got the gold and the glitters that go with his genius?
I don't think he wanted that. I think he wanted to be one of these quiet people who achieves immense things without the publicity. And he was satisfied that he had done it in terms of redoing the whole math curriculum. But he also submitted some brilliant mathematical concepts to the Mathematical Gazette in London. And I think his last one he deposited when he was 92. So he kept on working. He kept on coming up with theories, and yes, he could have been a more demonstrative mathematician, but I think he was quietly brilliant, and that was his style.
And not wanting to sound like a therapist, but I'm curious that you said a while back that you had a very little input from your parents. Clearly, I can safely say they weren't mentors.
Whatever the opposite of mentorship is, I don't know quite what the word is, but they didn't care, showed no interest, didn't actually speak to me that much. I think I only had 3 conversations with my father in his entire life.
Well, that brings me to my next question. In that case, did you and Dr. Cundy, almost unconsciously perhaps, seek each other out? He could see a boy that was in need of guidance, of mentoring, and you needed perhaps a father figure to guide you.
I don't think it was that close. I never looked at him as a father figure. I was fiercely independent. I wasn't looking for any crutch. I think I wanted to be like him. I think his brilliance was so stunning. He had answers for everything. and looked at things differently. I think he was a sort of a contrarian mathematician. And the fact that he was so prescient to understand in the early 1960s that computers were going to drive society for the rest of the history of civilization, I think that shows an incredible brilliance. And I think I was more than a little in awe of him, and he was one of the teachers who genuinely stood out as being brilliant. Most of the teachers were very repetitive, went through the class, another school year, get them through, get to the exam, get them out of here, bring in the next group. He tended to have a different sort of a different way of teaching.
But there's astonishing nobility there that he actually chooses to teach rather than to go into computing, which is clearly a passion of his, or was.
The mathematics that created it was his passion. I think he was less concerned about the electronics and the hardware, but he had this passion about understanding logic switches, binary structure. It was just stunning what he taught me at that early age, and I just absorbed it all.
It's astonishing. I don't know if this is quoted in America, but it certainly is here, and it makes my blood boil. And I think it was from a George Bernard Shaw play, that those who can do, those who can't teach, which is a horribly fallacious, hollow, derogatory thing to say, because it's the assumption that you cannot follow your vocation. Teaching, as you've shown, is a vocation.
Well, and I think it's an immense reward when you see the impact. Unfortunately, a lot of the teaching is by rote, and you don't really see the benefits. Unfortunately, Dr. Cundy never saw what he did for me. I never communicated with him after I left. I'd moved on, and it would have been wonderful if I'd had an opportunity to sit down with him and say, "This is what you did." And I don't think he ever really knew.
But what a great shame, Mike, because he died in 2005.
Yes.
Not that long ago.
No. And he was.
Were you never tempted to go and try and find him out?
Not really. I went back to the school a couple of times, but it's only more recently when I've really done a detailed introspection of those people who impacted my life. When I put the book together, I really was struck by the three people who'd impacted my life most. And I went back and really examined it retroactively and really started understanding the impact. Before that, I kind of looked at him as just a nice teacher who helped me, who picked me out, who was supportive. I didn't really understand at that particular point the impact that he had, because I was living my life, and it was only when I started to write the book and started to look back on my life, here was this wonderful bright light that stood out right at the beginning of my really conscious education. And so I think it's more retroactive. I think it's something that I've recently recognized.
It's perhaps an impossible question as we draw this to a close, but without Dr. Cundy as your mentor, that teacher, would you have been able to follow the road that you have?
I can't say. I mean, it was the path less traveled. I went up to London, I answered a newspaper ad, sat an exam, and got into the computer business when I was 19. Whether I would have done that because of him, I don't know. It's very hard to look at cause and effect, but I do look back at his support and his mentorship now in an entirely different light. Understanding the obligation I have for mentorship, because you don't know what the future is what the impact is going to have. And unfortunately, he never knew it. But I think deep down, he understood that he was setting me on a path that he was very comfortable that I would take advantage of his mentorship.
Do you think there's room these days in schools now for mentors like him?
Yes, absolutely. And I do some teaching at a small school for troubled kids who are coming back to high school, having left because of drugs or serious problems. And we only have 25 in the school, so it gives me a great opportunity to mentor these kids and to really help them get through high school and look at a lot of the opportunities that are available. So I think there's plenty of opportunity. I think there's enormous opportunity of people who are retired. There are 70 million of us baby boomers in America. There's only a certain amount of golf and visiting the doctor's office that you can do. And so I think more people should understand the value of their accumulated knowledge in their life and being able to share it with kids either in their 7, 8, 9, but certainly through 14 through 18, which I think is unbelievably formative. And so I think I think there is a great need, and we have a tidal wave of people that are available. So I'm actively trying to encourage as many people as possible to take on a teaching and mentorship role.
And just finally, Mike, if you had the chance to talk to Dr. Cundy, to take the train up to the Lake District in England where he lived his twilight years, what would be your words to him?
Well, first would be thank you, but then I would explain to him the journey that he set me on and how much enjoyment I had, and that he was pivotal in my life. And he may not have even realized it. So I would explain to him what he did, because I think many teachers and many mentors have no idea of the eventual outcome of their kindness and their caring. So I think it would be a good way to sort of close the chapter. This is what you did at the beginning of my life, and this is what I accomplished, and thank you.
Well, Dr. Cundy sounds like an astonishing individual. I'm sure he'd be very proud of you, Mike. He was, of course, your first mentor. You had 2 more great mentors in your career, and we'll talk about them in future episodes. But for now, thanks very much. Thank you for listening to The Art of the Turnaround. If you love this podcast, please like and subscribe. You can follow the show on Instagram and TikTok at The Art of the Turnaround. You can follow Mike Dunlop on LinkedIn or his website, theartoftheturnaround.com. This podcast was produced by Cadence 3 Studios. I'm your host and story editor, Alex Dunlop. April Bricker is our executive producer. Burke Tobenek is our producer and editor, additional editing by Eric Scheel. The show art was designed by Todd Arbuckle. Andrew Kindred is our sound engineer, and Eric Munch is our audio mixer. The Art of the Turnaround is based on the book by Mike Dunlop.